Hello, I am Anna Scheidel, working on the Laura Secord project with Group 7. I am part of the coding development team with Quinlan Walker, and for the design team we have both Jonathan Bell and Emily Yang. I will give a brief overview of the topic in question to recap what the project is about. The project is about Laura Secord, a woman who walked 32 kilometers in the dead of night through a forest while a war was going on in order to deliver a message. The virtual experience is meant to cover that journey through an interactive map with various traps as well as a pursuer. In our last presentation, we did not have too much done, but for our beta presentation, we completed a few core tasks. Off to you, Emily.
Currently we have a decent amount of assets for the environment. I've created a small mock-up of what this setting for our game will be like with the assets we already completed. We have a couple of kinds of trees, rocks, logs, and one trap. When put together in a scene, they look something like this. The environment will be textured and there will be extra environment details that will be added in the future. Our game is low poly in style, and I wanted to be able to add more detail to the objects of our game without making the designs of the models more complicated. So I have created some simple textures that can go on top of objects and on top of the plane to add more detail. All these textures are semi-translucent and work over top of any object, coloring or texturing that may already exist. I've created two kinds of blood splatters that can be put on top of the ground or an object. I made bear prints that can be put on the ground. I've also made two groupings of pine cones that can be placed under the pine trees. And I've also made a scratch pattern that can be added onto different objects like trees to add another level of detail. I've also created bases for the main character Laura Secord and the enemy, which is a soldier. Right now they're just female and male bases, and they don't have any extra detail. I will need to add clothing and hair to them in the future. I've also created a lantern that Laura Secord can hold. The lamp needs a texture, but that will be completed and implemented very soon. I also based the lantern's model design off a vintage oil lamp because I wanted to make sure that it was accurate to the time the game was set in.
Hello, I'm Jonathan. I'm one of the 3D modelers for the Laura Secord game. So far, most of the 3D modeling for the game has been for the environment. We have 3 types of trees, a log, and a rock, all of which are spawning procedurally throughout the landscape. We also have bear traps, which help make traversing the land a little bit more dangerous, higher stakes. So, as of now, the only obstacle in the world currently is the bear trap. For the final build of the game, we were aiming to have more natural elements as obstacles as well, such as exposed roots and perhaps holes in the forest floor. In the last presentation, we were aiming to have wildlife in the game as potential obstacles as well. And we still plan to, we still are aiming for that, if we can do so within the time frame. So next we will aim to have more assets for the environment, such as a cabin which will mark the location where the players will go to win the game. There will also be more 3D models, such as, bushes and tufts of grass maybe, which will also add more life to the world.
Hello, my name is Quinlan Walker. I am one of the lead programmers working on the Laura Secord project for IMD 3901. For the beta of this project, I have primarily been working on the terrain and mapping a black and white image to the height values on the vertexes of a plane. This gives a nice texture to the environment, which we can then populate with the assets that the 3D design team has been creating for the last several weeks. After some testing, I found out that the optimum performance that a frame runs at is approximately 100 by 100 vertex on a plane, and then mapping some percentage of environment assets to the individual vertices using their coordinates in 3D space. Though a 90-degree transformation around origin is required due to the initial plane being created at a vertical angle to the player. With just a little bit of math, the individual vertices of the plane can be squashed and stretched pretty much as our group sees fit. In my case, I decided to squash the z-axis a little bit because it jutted out at odd angles and was not aesthetically pleasing with the low poly count that we had. Additionally, I stretched the plane along the x and y axis so that it would cover a larger area and give our players more surface area to move on. Unfortunately, due to some unforeseen issues, we are unable to use our 3D artist's assets. For the time being, we will be using random A-frame polygon primitives in their place. With some continued elbow grease, I have hope that we will be creating several additions, and with the inclusion of traps, this is turning out to be a promising, fun game to be working on.
When going to enter the game, you will be met with a home page with 3 different options. The first 2 options in multiplayer are for the users to be able to choose whether they will be Lore Secord or the Soldier. When loaded in, players will see a series of objects in random positions that will later be replaced with environmental objects as previously shown. Each player has a lantern that only they can use to move around. As for unique components, in the Lore Secord mode, the user has the Lore Secord model base as their avatar. Other components that are unique is the ability to see the base camp, or in this case the sphere. The sphere will be replaced by a base camp in the future for the final destination. However, it is being used right now in order to easily click while the camp is being created by the design team. The game will then end once it is clicked. The soldier will spawn with the soldier base model as their avatar. The soldier user does not see the base camp in order to give the Lore Secord user a chance to reach their destination, as there will be traps in the way to slow Lore Secord down. The click component from the soldier's perspective has not been fully realized yet, though it is in development. The third option is single player, which is still under development. In the single player mode, the user takes on the attributes of Lore Secord as in the multiplayer mode, but must compete against time in order to reach their destination. The time component has not been added in yet, but will in the future. In summary, we have succeeded in creating base environmental and character models, as well as loading them in. We have also been able to make some basic game components that add a uniqueness to the different characters. Creating the point map with randomized object placement, as well as creating a network for multi-user interactions, were the most challenging parts of our project. We have successfully completed these. While there is still a lot to be done, the Lore Secord virtual experience is on a surefire path to being completed with the same ideas that were initially proposed. Thank you for tuning in to our presentation.